screaming things about how I should love her and how she had done so much for me. Completely taken by surprise and totally in shock, I watched her run towards me. My friend ran back and watched in horror as she grabbed me and began licking and spitting on my face while she bear hugged me. I managed to slip out of her grips and then sprint off into the main road. Needless to say, I got very drunk that night. So, I'm currently a 23-year-old student living in London. The story takes place about 8 months ago when I was still in my hometown. It still freaks me out to this day. So, about 1 year ago, I had started working in a local pub right near my house. I had got the job there as my friend Louise was the manager, and she desperately needed staff. My first few weeks there were uneventful. The pub was pretty dead most of the time, other than a few of the regulars, Harry and Ben, that Louise was friendly with, and eventually so was I. As it was nearing Christmas, the pub had started to become busier, and there were more unfamiliar faces. One face in particular was this man whose name that I never learned, but for the sake of the story, we will call him Tim. Now, Tim was probably in his late 40s or early 50s, was of quite stocky build, bald, and often wore tattered clothes and smelled like he didn't wash himself very often. Other than the weird vibe that he generally kept to himself, ordered pints and sat on his own, Tim's presence started off as seldom but increased. He would appear mostly when the pub was empty and when I was there on my own, and always silent as a mouse. I would be doing something such as wiping the back of the bar or cleaning the nozzles, and I would turn around and he would just be standing there, silently waiting for me to serve him. He wasn't a particular talkative kind of man, but my pub attracted quite a few quirky and colorful characters, so this wasn't a strange occurrence. One Friday night when we were quite busy, he kept trying to get my attention. I apologized to him and advised I was serving someone else who had a large order, but that I would be with him as soon as I could, and he became increasingly angry. When I eventually got to serve him, he just stared at me blankly and then left the pub. I thought nothing of it and just got on with my shift. Now, my friend Louise, being the manager, also lived right above the pub. So once everyone was out and we had closed, she would go upstairs and I would lock the door behind me and then post the keys through the letterbox. Normally after my shift, I would go to the 24-hour Tesco's to go grab a late-night snack, as we often didn't have time to eat during our shifts on the weekends. My home is then only a 10-minute walk away from the Tesco's. As I was crossing the road to get to the shop, I noticed Tim sitting on a wall staring at me, which made me feel uneasy. I walked quickly to the Tesco's, got my meal deal, as well as some sweets, and then left. As I was walking out of the Tesco's, I had noticed a figure lurking in the car park, which was badly lit. I walked as fast as I could to get out of the car park, and I heard walking behind me. As I reached the brightly lit main road, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Tim. He asked if he could walk me home. I panicked. I advised him I would be staying at the pub tonight as I had to open in the morning. I then ran to the pub and called Louise and told her that I didn't feel safe walking home. She let me come upstairs and we ended up just laughing about it. A few hours later at about 3 a.m., I felt that it was finally safe now and that he had to have left by now, so I walked home and I was fine. I woke up the next day to a banging on my door. It was probably about 11 a.m., which is normally the time the postman comes. I was a little confused because I hadn't ordered anything, and I lived on my own. But since it was nearing Christmas, I thought maybe my parents had sent me a present. I went downstairs in my half-asleep state and opened the door, but there was no one there. I passed it off as just kids on the street messing around. Throughout the day, though, this kept happening. I would hear a knock, and then there would be no one there. Work time rolls around, so I leave to go to work, headphones in, as it was still relatively light outside and work was close. Literally 5 minutes after I walked through the door, there's Tim. I explained to Louise that Tim really freaks me out and that we should ban him. My friend laughs and said that he's harmless, that he probably just thinks I'm good looking. I laughed it off nervously and just got on with my job. As normal, Harry and Ben walk in and they order their 2 pints of dark fruit and Jaeger bombs, which I'd already started pouring. Now, the way the bar is laid out is it had 2 sides. There's the sports bar side, which has a pool table and TV for football games, and the restaurant side, which has tables and chairs for eating. Harry and Ben always stayed on the sports bar side so they could put on music on the jukebox and play pool. I went to place their drinks on the bar and collect money, and asked them how their week's been, when they pointed at Tim. He was at this point standing on the restaurant side of the bar staring at me, despite Louise working and asking him if he wanted a drink. He just replied no and stood there. Well, they then told me that he had been asking them questions about me, such as where I live, if I had a boyfriend, and then some more inappropriate questions such as how old I am and if I was a virgin. He had also made a passing comment on how he wanted to deflower me. For the record, in case it mattered, I'm not a virgin. However, I'm about 5'2" in a slim frame, and I've always been told that I have a baby face. I pulled Louise into the office and again asked that we ban him as he was making me increasingly uncomfortable. She also mentioned that he was asking about me, as well as what time I finished and if I would be here alone, if I had a boyfriend, etc. So she obliged and she told him to leave. This would have been about 9 p.m. At the end of the night, Louise wasn't feeling very well, and since everyone had left the pub, I told her that I would finish up closing and she could just finish now. So I get on with it, wiping tables and restocking the bar. I came up from the cellar where we kept all the bottles, and I saw a figure standing by the door to the smoking area. As soon as I looked, it was gone, and I had convinced myself that I was going mad. Time comes to leave, and I lock the door and post the keys like normal and start making my way home. I cross the road and I'm about to turn when suddenly Tim grabs me and then pins me against the fence. He starts smelling my hair and stroking my neck and then whispering all the nasty things that he's going to do to me. I was just standing there frozen, unable to move or scream, paralyzed by fear. Luckily, Ben turns the corner, sees, rips Tim off of me, gets into a bit of a fight with him, and then Tim runs off. I just started crying my eyes out, and Ben walked me home and I called the police and told them everything. I gave a description of him, and they said they would get back to me. About a week later, I got a call from the police saying they had apprehended him, and I was to come in to verify that it was him. I obliged, and yes, they had in fact caught him. Turns out he was actually wanted for assaulting 2 local women, which I had read about in the weeks before. I believe that he's now serving a sentence in prison. This happened 3 summers ago, but I remember the main events. To preface this, I've been on a shocking amount of dates, and I've put myself in many foolish situations in the past. I'm a female, and I was 25 at the time if it matters. It all started on the Plenty of Fish app. I came across a cute guy. He was my type physically, kind of nerdy looking. On his profile, he had very adventurous photos of him hiking and traveling. He seemed really excited to get to know me. Once he saw that I looked at his profile, he sent me a message. We flirted a bit back and forth and exchanged phone numbers even though we lived about an hour away. He said on the app that he's never been to my city and didn't plan on it, so we probably wouldn't meet. I respected his honesty. I don't like wasting my time. One day shortly after meeting him online, he had texted me randomly saying he's in my town for some work thing, and he invited me to a bar that he was at. I decided to meet up since I was already in the area. He said he would pick me up. I was dumb and naive and agreed, even though that it was just over 4 blocks away. It took him way longer than it should have to get me, and I honestly don't think he was ever actually at the bar. Once in Plenty of Fish Date's car, I noticed it was a rental, and that it seemed like he had just gotten his license because he was a terrible driver. After driving in circles, he told me to pick a place, but not in the area because parking is impossible. I picked a place 15 minutes away by car with lots of parking, but also a busy place since I was with a stranger. Once there, he had started pressuring me to drink. He insisted. I'm not a huge drinker, but I do enjoy pub-style bars. I caved and had a drink, and was again pressured to have another one. He was very pushy and seemed really irritated that I wasn't going for it. Now, usually I'd end a date pretty quickly if I was mistreated, but he became charming enough to keep me there at least until we were done with our date. I saw an old acquaintance at the bar, and I wanted my date to know that I knew him. In my head, I think I just wanted my date to know that someone could identify him. I'm not a paranoid person, but I think my subconscious was on alert. After about an hour talking in the bar, I tell him that I'm ready to head out. He then insisted that we go across the road to get coffee. At the time, it seemed strange to me. Neither one of us had much to drink, and we didn't need to sober up. Coffee seems like an odd choice otherwise. I entertained it though. Once there, we sipped our drinks. He told me that he rented a beautiful Airbnb in a nearby neighborhood that is more out of the city and in the country. He told me how he had it all to himself and invited me, going on about how nice it is. I kept politely saying no and throwing around different excuses, which he would counter with a reason for me to come. With no actual intention of going, I agreed, but only if he would drive me home to get overnight things. I felt like he wasn't going to let me say no. He seemed happy with that answer, so we headed out. While driving the direction of my place, he said that instead he would stop at a 7-Eleven and grab me travel-sized toiletries so I wouldn't need anything. I felt panicked because my plan was not to go with him. Something about him was off, and I really felt stupid for even getting back in his car to begin with. He turned his car and we were then headed towards the more country area. Literally, there aren't any 7-Elevens or any open stores in the middle of nowhere. Then I mentioned that I'm actually thinking that I'd prefer not to stay with them, and then asked to be brought home. He then said something that made me completely nervous to be around him for much longer. He said that he's sharing the Airbnb with the owners, and he said they're really fun and sweet, and they like to drink and play games together. He originally said that he had it all to himself, so which is it? I knew that I didn't want to make it obvious that I was catching on to his lies, so I went along with it and just said, "Oh, but I have to wear my cute fluffy overnight PJs instead of my date dress, because I'll be way more comfy that way." Then I spewed off a few other things. I mentioned that I needed my medication and absolutely can't miss a dose. Surprisingly, he turned around, and as we drove back into the city, I felt a bit more calm, but at that point still not safe. Finally, we got close to my place. I had absolutely no intention of letting him close enough to know where I live. He was mentioning that he was going to come up to my apartment once we got there, and that is just a huge hell no. I don't know what I would do, but I looked for any opportunity to get out of the situation, knowing that he could turn around and take me somewhere private in the matter of 15 minutes if he wanted. We got to a stop sign where people were crossing, thank God. I then quickly but calmly got out and then said, "Hey, I think I have a headache. I'll text you." I closed the car door and then went through a public park, which was right beside a building that his car wouldn't be able to drive into. I looked back just to make sure that he wasn't getting out of his car and following me, and I could see him staring at me. He was so furious, and I have chills right now just thinking about it. Within the hour, he had blocked me on Plenty of Fish. Looking back, I think that he possibly wanted to get me a coffee to possibly put something in it. I think that he told me on Plenty of Fish that we wouldn't ever be able to meet to maybe cover his ass, and I know that he didn't have good intentions with me. Since then, I've met my fiance on Plenty of Fish and was super careful about dating up until then, always making sure the first few dates are very public and to arrange my own transportation. This happened about 15 years ago. At the time, I was dating around and I had a few creepy encounters during that time, but this guy takes the cake. He was an acquaintance my brother had met at a bar a few times and was showing around the local area because he was new to the country. My brother set us up because he was apparently desperate for a girlfriend, And I guess I was pretty desperate too, because we went on a date together. The date was probably the worst date I've ever been on. I showed up to the restaurant we were meeting at. He was late, which isn't a huge deal, so I let it slip and we went to sit down. To be honest, I knew from the start I wasn't really attracted to him, but I thought I would be polite and see if we'd have a nice night. He started off polite too. He held the door for me, pulled my seat out, the usual. It wasn't really necessary, but it was nice anyway. Then when we were sitting down waiting for someone to come and take our orders, I was reading the menu, and he had started talking about how much his fiancée would have loved this place. That took me by surprise, and naturally I had asked about his fiancée. He revealed that he had a fiancée before moving over here, but that he had just left her to move to another country. I asked why they had broken up, and he said they never really broke up, but he just got fed up with her nagging him about various things and just moved away. I really didn't know what to say after that, so I changed the subject and had just started asking him more about himself and where he used to live. He wasn't really forthcoming. Eventually, our waiter turned up and had started talking to us. To clarify for the next part, our waiter was a man of color, and he had an unusual accent for our area. So my date stares blankly at him for a while, then turns to me and says, "You understand this guy?" I said that yes, I could understand him before telling him our orders. After he left, my lovely date continued to shock me. He said, "I wouldn't normally leave ordering to the lady, but that brown guy talked really weirdly and I didn't get it." Wow. Way to tell me you're a racist and a sexist in one breath, dude. Again, I was speechless for a few moments before I got angry with him. I don't remember exactly what I said. It was something along the lines of, "Well, I'm not a lady, so I can order for myself just fine, thanks. And why make racial remarks?" Then he got annoyed with me and told me that he wasn't racist. He just wasn't used to that kind of person where he was from. I pointed out that he wouldn't have met me if he just stuck to people he was used to in his own country. He calmed down and then told me that he wouldn't want that because he's glad he met me. Honestly, I found that a little weird, given that I didn't see any way to say that this date was going well, and he didn't know me very well at all. But I decided since we had just ordered, I should stay, get my meal, and try to redeem the evening before I leave, and then never see this man again. So I answered some of his questions about me. Basic getting to know me and small talk stuff for the most part. Then started on about my previous dates and if I was a virgin, whether I would be willing to wait until marriage and then be submissive to my husband or not. So I settled for a, "None of your business. Now I need to leave." I checked the prices on the menu, and I left money for my half of the food plus a tip on the table and got up to leave. He said he didn't see why I was being so unreasonable with them, as though this had been a normal date, but then told me that I couldn't expect him to take my money because that was an insult to him. "Fine, dude. You want to pay for a meal that's not getting eaten, you pay for it. I'm not that mad about spending money that I'll stop you." So I took my money back and walked straight out. I just assumed that yes, it was an awful evening, but I wouldn't have to see him again. I wasn't even back to my house when my brother started texting me asking where I was because my date had called him in tears because I had gone off for no reason and he didn't know where I was or what to do. Thankfully, my brother was pretty calm about it and assumed that I had left for a reason. I explained everything to him and he was pretty surprised too. After that night, we both tried to cut contact. My brother had stopped meeting up with the guy and we both blocked the Facebook account we had for him too. My brother also blocked his number because he wouldn't stop texting him asking about me, alternating between being really weird worried about me to saying that he hoped I dropped dead. Then he had started making endless different accounts on social media to harass us. He told my brother that he didn't know why we weren't talking to him. He posted a bunch of weird posts describing me in detail before going on to call me a lot of horrible names. We kept blocking them and moving on. Then the harassment got worse. He either found me and followed me at some point, or got my address from a friend and turned up one day standing around outside my house asking to come in and speak to me. When I refused to let him in, he grabbed my arm to prevent me from going in either, and he started to tell me that he didn't want to let me go because I would never find a man who would love me like he did, and that if I walked away from him again, I would really regret it one day when I was old and lonely. He went on and on like this for ages and ages while I tried to pull my arm away from him before I got fed up with this and yelled at him to get off of me and leave me alone, then kicked him in the shin. He let go of my arm but cursed at me, and he said I was being ungrateful to him, but I took my opportunity to run inside and lock my door. He started banging on my door, then trying to push it inwards. I was getting both upset by this man and just super fed up with his presence in my life. So I grabbed my phone and called the police, telling them that someone was trying to get into my house. I was told that someone would be with me soon, but 20 to 30 minutes later there was no sign of them anywhere, and I was getting quite upset because this man was forcing my door and I thought the lock was going to break soon. So I called my brother who lives nearby just because I knew he would come, even though I wasn't sure if he would be able to help much. About 15 minutes later, my brother turns up. And after a brief conversation that I didn't quite hear outside, the pressure was gone off the door. I waited a few minutes and then texted my brother to see what was going on and if I would be alright to look outside now. He didn't reply, and the next thing I heard was the police turning up. I went to see what was going on. Apparently, after my initial call, they had received another call from a neighbor saying there were two men fighting on my lawn. I had guessed this was my brother and the guy, since my brother looked pretty out of breath and pretty shook up, and the guy wasn't around anymore. My brother explained to the police that he had tried to stop the man getting into my house, and then the man had hit him. I had told my side of the story, and some of my other neighbors were asked what they had seen as well, and were able to tell them about his attempts to get in. Plus, there were marks on the outer side of the door where he had tried repeatedly to get inside. The police went to look for him, and a few weeks after, I was called and I was told that they thought that they found him, but when they wanted me to look at the suspected person, it wasn't the same man. I never heard anything else, and I don't know what happened to him. I didn't see him again, and so I'm probably safe after 15 years. Regardless, I don't ever want to see him again. This was an experience I had alongside my BFF in high school. This was about 2006, maybe 2007 in rural upstate New York. We met in 3rd grade and are still friends to this day. We're both 27 now. Let me give you some background information now. My friend B and I became instant best friends when we met in the 3rd grade, and we were inseparable. We frequented each other's homes so much that her mom set up her guest room as my room. I had toys, clothes, pictures. Everything I needed was there. I was family. Pictures of B and I hung up on the walls of the home owned by her very proud mother, Shelley. Shelley had always wanted 2 daughters, and she loved me so much that she actually considered me her second daughter. Now, on to the meat of the story. Again, this incident took place when B and I were sophomores in high school. Her mother was divorced and dated a few different men, meeting some off sites like eHarmony. She had been speaking to a man for a few weeks, gushing about how manly and charming he was. She was really excited and always showed us their profiles before she decided to go on an actual date with one of these men. She would always say, "I need my daughter's stamps of approval." One night she called us to her room and showed us this man that she had been talking all about. His profile was simple, as one would imagine for a middle-aged man in 2007 on eHarmony. The headline read, "Looking for a strong mother." I made a joke about his odd placement for caps and just how strange a way to start out, but we moved forward. It told of his metalwork background, his love of cold steel, and his work in a foundry that kept his icy heart just warm enough. I was honest and I told her it sounded off, but he was handsome. Sporting black, well-groomed hair, a beard, a strong jaw, icy blue eyes, and a relatively fit body for a 40-something-year-old male. I really stressed on the weird vibe. Then B joked how Shelley always picked out the antisocial ones, and we laughed knowing this wasn't wrong. Shelley's brought some really weird stories home. But what do you expect from meeting men online? We told her to go for it, so they planned on dinner. It was a haul for him, about a 2-hour drive. He was driving to our location where they would then take one car into town. B and I helped Shelley pick out her outfit, helped her with her hair and makeup, and then went back upstairs so she could have some free time to herself before the long night. We headed up the stairs where B and I were painting a wall in her room, just listening to music and cutting up. He had just let himself in the house like no big deal, and then just came upstairs without saying a word. No knocking, no doorbell. The dogs didn't even bark. Nothing. So we get spooked, jump, scream, and crap our pants a little when we hear a man start walking behind us. We don't know how long he had been in the house. We don't know how long he had stood behind us without speaking. But when he did speak, we shook. Well. I didn't know I was getting a 2-for-1 deal, he said quietly in a gravely low voice. He chuckled as we stood there in shock of the stranger in a room. He sauntered over to us like a man on a Sunday walk. The smell of cigarettes filled the room, as if Rod Serling himself was standing in the corner explaining our situation to the audience for our own personal episode of The Twilight Zone. Right then, I noticed how much this guy looked just like the guy in the picture Shelley had showed us, except he had salt and pepper, not jet black hair, and his eyes were not ice blue, but black, not brown, but black. It looked like this guy was 100% pupil. Are you... I was then interrupted by Shelley shouting, "Who got hurt?" She must have thought we were horsing around and that one of us got hurt. This was normal for us because we goofed around a lot. She was jolted at the sight of this man blocking her from us. He turned around just as soon as she reached the top of the stairs, and then he held his arms out and said in a way less low tone than he used earlier, "Shelley, you look beautiful. I knocked, but no one answered. I hope it's okay I let myself in. These are your girls? They're beautiful, just like their mommy." I'll never forget how he said mommy. It felt dirty. B and I both side-eyed each other, then stepped down off our stepladders. We were both very in tune with each other. I felt weird, and I knew she did too, and we both felt the odd air of the room. Shelley glanced away from him and at us, who were behind him, looking at her with wide eyes, both kind of shaking our heads side to side in disbelief. Shelley looked back to him. This exchange only took a few seconds, but it seemed like an eternity. She had forced a smile at him and said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Next time just ring the bell. I'll open the door." He nodded and he walked towards her with open arms and then hugged her like they had been the oldest of friends. She looked at us as they hugged and just kind of rolled her eyes to show us what she thought of his excuse. She proceeded to tell him that it wasn't appropriate as she led him down the stairs, and we had heard him apologize over and over. B and I instantly ran to our phones. We agreed to text her mom what he had just said to us so we could tell her without him knowing. We hit send, and about 10 minutes later we had heard footsteps up the stairs. It was Shelley, and she shut the door behind us and asked us if we were okay. She hugged us, and she told us she was sorry he made us feel uncomfortable. She explained to us that he said we reminded him of his girls and didn't mean to scare us. We nodded. Then they said they were leaving out for the date. We hugged her, said to be safe, and we would see her soon. As she headed down the stairs, B and I just looked at each other. We both knew that something wasn't right, but we were both speechless from the good scare we received from this dark man just about 15 minutes prior. We heard them walking and talking, heading towards the front door a few minutes later. Shelley shouted up the stairs that she loved us. We yelled back that we loved her too, and then the door shut. We instantly had started talking to each other, saying the same things. B spoke over me. "He laid that charm so thick as soon as he saw Mom." B exclaimed further, "And did you see his eyes? What the heck was that? He looked so much like the guy from the pictures, but not exactly." We both concurred our feelings about the stranger, his scent, his demeanor, his voice. He was just like something out of a classic stranger danger advert. Again, we agreed to text Shelley how we felt. She thanked us and told us it seemed to be going well, and she would let us know that she was safe every hour. B and I were just freaked out, and even more so that Shelley was not. It was like a weird spell he'd cast on her. It was odd, but we wanted to think the best for Shelley, as she was really excited about this guy. She texted us every hour until she got home. Her last text said, I'm okay, but I'm officially freaked out and I'm coming home now. Be home soon. We freaked out and paced around until we saw headlights pull into the driveway. It had been about 5 hours since she left, and only about an hour since that last text. We were inside with the lights off, watching through the side window, trying not to be seen when the motion sensor light flooded the yard and light fell into the driveway. A truck flew into the driveway. The passenger side door flung open before the truck was at a full stop, and Shelley's feet were on the pavement just as fast. She waved at the driver, and she had kind of jogged to the door wide-eyed. She reached the front door, turned, and waved the truck off. She had her house key ready in the hand that she wasn't waving with. She then unlocked the door and slid into the safety of the house. "Keep the lights off. Go upstairs," Shelley said as she locked the 2 deadbolts in the chain, not once looking at us. We headed up the stairs behind her. We walk into B's room and look out the window down to the truck, still parked out front with the lights on and the engine running. As we all stared at the truck, Shelley told us of the ordeal that she went through. Long story short, he had made reservations at the wrong restaurant, so he suggested they go buy some food and have a picnic-style dinner at a local park. Shelley didn't do well outdoors. She was an office woman, so she declined. However, he had just drove so long to get here, and then he hit her with, "Well, you kind of owe me." And Shelley said that made her feel bad, knowing that he drove 2 hours. So when he mentioned that he had a vacation home and he could cook for her close by, she agreed. She said they got to the house and it was nice enough. A log cabin near Bethel, New York, only about 35 minutes from our town. Shelley said he kept talking about how easy it was to get her alone. He also kept saying that he liked strong mommies because they have such fight, but she caved. This made her skin crawl. This wasn't the man she thought it was. This also wasn't the man in the picture, and Shelley had started to slowly realize this. Shelley said that when she had asked for a ride home due to her feeling ill, it wasn't the happiest, but he complied, and he stopped cooking and had started looking for the keys that she knew that he had in his pocket. He had then started asking her about our girls, referring to myself and B. This freaked Shelley out so bad, and she said she was going to get someone to come get her, and that he didn't like, and he found his keys instantly. Once they were out of the house and in the truck wouldn't start, so they had to move to his work truck. Shelley was visibly shaken and wouldn't take her eyes off the truck in the driveway as she had spilled the story out post-haste. She said that there was a garage, that he said they had to walk around the house to hop in the work truck. She said that she felt she had no choice but to play it cool and just agree to go. She hopped out and walked around the house, and there indeed was another garage with a truck in it. The same truck that we were all currently staring at just sitting in the driveway. It smelled like bleach and metal, Shelley whispered. She told us on the way home that he just kept asking about us. What did we do that she didn't like? What got us spankings? What were the naughty things we got in trouble for? What would she do without us? And the one question to scare you out of your pants as a parent: would you sacrifice yourself for our girls? Shelley said she just stared at him in awe and disbelief, and then he just laughed. She got more and more concerned as she noticed her surroundings in the back of the truck that she was riding home in. There were what she thought were chains in a bucket sitting on a desk that was drilled into the floor, a duffel bag, and very large metal objects she wasn't too sure of. This is when he had started to pull out pictures on his little flip phone that he had of us. He must have found Shelley's Facebook, and he took pictures of our pictures and had them on his phone, waving it around, telling Shelley what a good strong mommy she had been to us, and she should be proud of what she had accomplished. By this time, they were pulling into the driveway, and Shelley was done with this crap. She was just about finished when we saw the truck lights then turn off. Shelley immediately picked up the phone and dialed the sheriff and told him quickly that there was an unwelcome person outside our home. Being in such a small town, the sheriff not only went to school and graduated with Shelley, but he only lived 3 doors down. Just as we see this guy getting out of his truck with a duffel bag, we saw the sheriff whip up behind him. The man panicked and literally threw his duffel into the truck and tried to back into the sheriff to get out. When he realized that it was blocked from the rear, he went through the yard. We couldn't believe our eyes. The truck peeled out, taking some of the lawn with it. The sheriff came to the door to check on us, and he told us that he had units down the road just waiting for him. We all shared a good collective cry and rejoiced in our safety. It did, however, create some paranoia issues in the next couple of weeks due to the fact that we didn't know how long he was in the house when he just let himself in. Did he put cameras anywhere? Did he mess with the food in the house to hurt someone? I mean, it was bad, but we worked through it. We never heard anything about him being caught, and we did occasionally receive eerie messages on Facebook, 2 of which we knew were him, but we put that out of our minds. Haven't heard anything from or about him since about 3 months after the incident when the last message was received. It's been about 11 years since the incident, but we still talk about it when we can. Up until junior year of high school, I flew mostly under the social radar and stuck to my status as a nerd girl, but when I was 15, I joined varsity cheer. My school's cheerleaders weren't popular by definition, but everyone kind of knew who we were because we were on the announcements, performed at pep rallies, and generally engaged with the students a lot. I made a lot of friends that year, and some of them happened to be the cool kids. For a while, I thought this was my long-awaited karma payoff for the years of bullying that I'd suffered at their hands. I even developed a crush on one of them, a crush which the junior cheer captain herself volunteered to help me pursue. Homecoming is a big deal where I'm from, and I began fantasizing about my crush asking me to go with him. I had heard rumors that he was planning a dramatic proposal, and as homecoming season approached, I became more and more sure I would be his date. The junior cheer captain who was close with him kept dropping hints that I was right. One day at practice, she asked me what my favorite candy was, and I knew it would be so my crush would know what to give me. You can imagine my surprise when after an exhausting theater rehearsal, I walked into the parking lot and was confronted by a guy I'd hardly spoken to asking me to be his date. My theater friends all applauded, assuming I was overjoyed. I saw both of my parents in the parking lot recording the whole surprise. But most importantly, the cool friends that I'd recently befriended were standing right there behind him, egging him on. I didn't understand why, because he wasn't popular at all. In fact, he was known to be kind of creepy. The junior cheer captain was laughing, encouraging him to give me a box of my favorite candy he was holding. She had definitely orchestrated the whole thing. I didn't really know the guy, but I didn't want to humiliate him in front of the coolest kids in school. So I faked a smile and rolled with it. I promised myself that I'd deny him later in private so that he wouldn't be embarrassed. Afterwards, when my parents excitedly asked me how I felt about the ordeal, I explained how uncomfortable it made me. I said that I got strong creepy vibes from that guy. That didn't fly with my parents. My mother had accused me of having my expectations way too high, and my father demanded to know if I was secretly a lesbian. I had never had a boyfriend or shown much interest in dating, which is why he had asked this. To make his case stronger, I had just become best friends with the only openly gay girl our school had ever seen. Long story short, I knew that if I shut down my date, I'd effectively declare war on my parents. However, I played my dad's protective instinct against him and persuaded him to let me friend-zone my date. After all, he knows how high school boys think, right? I texted my date that night and explained that I only saw us as friends, but would still be happy to go to homecoming with them. He was very polite about it, although I could tell he was interested in me romantically. It seemed we'd reached a deal until the next day at school, when one of my cheerleader friends referred to my date as my boyfriend. I corrected her and I told her that we're just going to homecoming as friends. She seemed confused and told me my date was telling everyone who could listen that I was his girlfriend. A few more of my friends approached me with similar comments, and I confronted my date about them. He denied all involvement and suggested it was just a rumor. I reminded him that we were just friends and that I had zero romantic interest in him. He said he understood. I got a call from the junior cheer captain. She pretended to be sweet and conspiratorial, But I was still annoyed that she had led me to believe that my crush would be asking me to homecoming. She began her attempt to persuade me that I was wrong to friend-zone my date. She said that she had spent many afternoons planning his proposal with him, and she knew he was kind of creepy from afar, but he was sweet and caring underneath all that. I said if he was such a catch, then she should date him. Annoyed, she dropped the sweet act. She told me that I had to date him because he liked me so much, and he had gone to so much trouble to ask me to homecoming. I had to give him a chance because she'd gone out on a limb for me. I told her she was wrong, that I didn't have to do anything I didn't want to do, and I owed him nothing. I ended up hanging up on her soon after that, but that was just the beginning. Starting the next Monday, he would corner me in the hallway and give me a rose he held in his teeth. He usually did so between my 6th and 7th periods, when my path through the hall crossed his. I was deeply uncomfortable with this, and I told him so, but he wouldn't stop. I took different routes to escape him, but the junior cheer captain and her posse made a point of tracking me down so he could find me elsewhere. Every time he did this, everyone in the area would treat it as a sweet romantic gesture, despite my obvious discomfort. Wouldn't any girl be lucky to have a boy so devoted to her who gave her a rose every day? He was still telling everyone I was his girlfriend. The final straw for me was when he walked into a class he wasn't in to find me and then give me my daily rose. When he came in, I told him to get out and leave me alone. His feelings were clearly hurt, and he left looking like a kicked puppy. My classmates started calling me cold and heartless. It didn't matter what I had to say about him. I was an ice queen, refusing the sweet boy's advances. Everyone in the school had decided that I was in love with him, and that nobody cared what I had to say about it. My actual crush, who was part of the popular group, joined the junior cheer captain in pressuring me into returning my date's feelings. At every event where the cheerleaders were present, my date would push his way to the front of the crowd. He would go to great lengths to get my attention. At football games, he would have a flag in the student section so I'd look at him when we were cheering. The other girls would make comments on how endearing he was when he waited in the parking lot by our bus back to the school, all to hug me and tell me how great I did. I didn't know what else to do other than let this happen. I had only recently ascended to a position of visibility. If I conflicted too hard with the cool kids who were dead set on setting me up with this guy, I could be an outsider all over again. I hoped that if I just kept ranting to my real friends about how creepy he was and publicly let him do what he wanted, it would all blow over. My school had a 15-second attention span, so some scandal had to one-up me sooner or later. The truth emerged as usual in the locker room. It turns out the junior cheer captain had been telling him during their afternoons together that I was into him. He would come to her for help announcing his crush on me, and she'd gone a step further and convinced him that I felt the same, despite the fact that I didn't even know his name. She lied to him for weeks prior to the homecoming proposal, and when I told her that was wrong, she didn't care. She told me I should be grateful, because everybody was starting to think that I was gay. My best friend and I inspired to spread a rumor that we were dating. After all, everybody thought I was gay, right? But my date wasn't fazed. In fact, he told everyone that he'd just turned me straight again. Gross. 3 weeks after he asked me, it was finally homecoming night. Thanks to cheer obligations and a complete coincidence involving a switch backpack that left me without my dress, I ended up only attending the dance for half an hour. My date awkwardly stood on the side of the room while I danced my heart out to Mr. Brightside by the Killers. I almost felt bad for him when, right at the end, the junior cheer captain appeared like a summoned demon to suggest that we slow dance at the next opportunity. Thank God I escaped that one by walking to the DJ and suggesting he play Footloose. My date walked me out to the parking lot to wait for my mom to pick me up. While we waited for her to drive around, which took entirely way too long because she still hoped I'd stop making a fuss and date him, he asked me out. I politely declined. He quickly stammered that we could go with a group of people, like the junior cheer captain and my crush. I denied him again and made it clear that we were only friends, and I wasn't interested in romantic endeavors because I was too busy. That was actually true. I was in all advanced classes, varsity theater, and cheer, and I worked part-time. A few days later, a teacher eloped to Vegas, and nobody cared about my love life anymore. My date and I were distanced again by classmates and activities and work. It finally appeared that everything was going back to normal. That Friday at the football game, my crush had asked me to sit on his shoulders for the alma mater. Kind of a romantic thing at my school. Overjoyed, I accepted, and I hoped that this was the beginning of a new chapter for me. I ignored the frantically waving flag in the stands. On Monday, my date stood on a chair in his second period class, and then he announced that everyone should be wary of my crush because he would steal your girl. I heard everyone buzzing about it a few hours later when someone called me a horrible name, again for breaking my date's heart. I knew I was being dramatic, but I decided to not go to lunch that day, terrified of running into him. I'm so glad I didn't. Later on, I saw on Snapchat that my date had carved my name into his arm with a pair of scissors. His bleeding arm was screenshotted and sent to me by half a dozen people, most of them demanding why I'd hurt him like this. He did it in the middle of lunch in a crowded cafeteria, and somehow no administration noticed or cared. The school was buzzing. My date was a broken-hearted victim, and I was the evil, secretly gay girl who wouldn't give him a chance. I got so many dirty looks from people. By fifth period, I was ready to just walk out. But my good girl instincts kicked in, and I decided to tough it out for 2 more hours. Around that time, I got a panicked text from one of my cheer friends. While she'd initially been insistent that I date the creepy guy, she'd apparently changed her mind after the lunch incident earlier. She told me that my date, who was in her 5th period class, was going off the rails. He had started out saying that he wanted to kill himself because I wouldn't love him. This had then escalated to saying that he'd kill my crush for lying to me and stealing me away. Finally, he had started talking about how he knew where I lived. My parents had given him my address when he'd initially wanted to ask me to the dance at my house, and he would make me pay for wronging him. I knew that after 6th period, our paths through the hall would cross. Since the beginning of this ordeal, the school had cracked down on students getting outside, and my alternate route to escape him was no longer an option. My class was at the far end of the hall with nowhere to go but into the central hub, and he would be coming from the other end of the hallway towards mine. I was stuck up a chimney basically. Desperate, I texted the junior cheer captain to finish what she'd started and tell him that I wasn't and have never been interested in him. She made this mess, and I would make sure that she had to clean it up. She said that she'd go to the counselor, but that she didn't know what else to do. This was way beyond her control now. For the first and only time, I skipped class. I hid out in the theater hall and waited for the 7th period. I got a few texts during the passing period that my date was waiting for me by the bathrooms. There was a little alcove right there where you can't see people coming from around the corner, and the thought of him hiding there and waiting for me to walk by alone horrified me. Right before 7th period began, a few of my classmates burst in cackling and proclaimed that my date was coming down here after school to kill my crush. They thought this was hilarious, but judging by the look on my crush's face, this wasn't a joke to him anymore. Our teacher brushed this off as typical theater drama, pun fully intended. I watched the clock and tried not to cry, knowing that by the time the bell rang, my date would be outside waiting for me and my crush to emerge. That day ended up being a work day, so my crush and I were able to escape the classroom and hide out elsewhere in the theater hall to get away from him. He opted for the black box theater, and I went for the lighting closet. Obviously, I didn't witness what happened, but my best friend filled me in afterwards. Allegedly, my date had turned up 3 minutes before the bell rang and stood outside the classroom where we couldn't see him when we opened the door. He told everyone standing around that he was ready to have a knife fight with my crush. We don't really know if he actually had a knife or not, but the idea that he might was enough to terrify me. His arm was wrapped in paper towels that he was bleeding through. My best friend told him that my crush and I were gone, but he didn't believe her. He stood outside for 25 minutes until the administrators began walking through to make sure that no one was in the school who shouldn't be. My date wasn't in theater, so he wasn't allowed to stick around. That night, I texted him that not only would I never date him, but could no longer even see a friendship between us. I then sent him a number to a suicide hotline, and I told him to get help. Finally, I told him that he needed to learn what no meant, and that I never wanted to speak to him again. He responded that he was sorry, and he asked if there was anything he could do to fix this. I told him no. I don't think he learned the meaning of the word after all, because the same pattern repeated itself a few months later on Valentine's Day, the next year at homecoming, senior year, Valentine's Day, and also prom. But those are other stories. I've since graduated and gone off to college hundreds of miles away from him. My family back home moved from the address my parents gave him. Contrary to popular belief, I'm not gay. My crush, on the other hand, came out a few months later, and we were friends for the rest of high school. I'm working on handling romantic endeavors in a healthy way, but he really got in my head. He was the first person to ever show interest in me. Ironically, the last time I saw him was my first and only homecoming game after graduating, but this time I actually had true friends to defend me when he predictably tried to pull some weird stuff with me. The worst part, looking back, was somehow being at fault for everything. Even to this day, people from my high school reference the whole situation as, "That one time you wouldn't date that poor shy kid." I can't even appreciate red roses anymore. This is gonna be part 2. The whole first part of the story that you just heard happened in 2015 when I was a junior in high school, and I'm a junior in college now. I was 15 during the first homecoming debacle because I'm young for my grade. Everyone else involved was 16 or 17 at the time. My parents, after all this played out, had very different reactions. My mother apologized for not believing me in the first place and pressuring me to lower my standards. My relationship with her has become a success story in the past 4 years, and this experience jump-started its evolution. On the other hand, my father has rewritten the narrative entirely, and he insists that he never once advocated that I go to homecoming with my date. He says that he was always wary of this kid, and he also didn't ever ask if I was gay. I'm not. I'm bi, actually, but I didn't realize it until my senior year of high school. I didn't go to the counselor yet because she was shown to be bad at her job, as you'll see in this continuation. She liked to victim blame a lot. Well, she was fired after I graduated in 2017. My high school and home district in general was an administrative nightmare. I've heard from younger friends that after a massive staff turnover, things are finally starting to look up, but none of it improved during my time there. My story was perfectly in character for the level of ignorance my school expressed towards unhealthy activity. My date didn't and doesn't use social media, at least not to my knowledge. I found an abandoned Twitter account that looked like it might belong to him, but it was last active in 2016. I have no contact with him at all anymore, which I guess is a happy ending. A few people have implied that I'm making all of this up. They're not the first, and they probably won't be the last to say so. Even I know this crap is wild, and that's why I didn't say a word about it for years. I don't feel the need to prove my honesty to random strangers on the internet. If there's anything that I learned from this nightmare, it's that people will only believe what they want to believe. The truth is that I had a weird as all hell experience, and it's affected my life in a lot of ways. Believe it or not, I still have to deal with its repercussions on a daily basis. This post is less of an update than it is a continuation, since all of this happened years ago. Long story short, my ex didn't get the message after the homecoming junior year, and he ended up pulling some seriously weird crap even after we graduated. None of it was as epic as junior homecoming, but it definitely cast a shadow over the latter half of my high school experience. From here on out, due to his activity for the next 2 years, I'll be referring to him as my stalker. For the months after homecoming, things had started to settle down again. I didn't have any classes with my stalker, and the only person I still had to deal with was the junior cheer captain. She would go out of her way to be nice to me, inviting me to parties and buying me coffee and giving me rides to games, basically bribing me to keep quiet about what a manipulative person she was. My stalker appeared on Valentine's Day 2016. I was still a junior, but I had almost forgotten that homecoming had even happened, when halfway through my day he had cornered me in the hallway and gave me a rose out of his teeth. I had hoped that that would be the end of it, but I underestimated my classmates' appetite for drama. During 7th period theater, We were in the library computer lab. After the rose thing, my crush from fall semester, who had since come out as gay, warned us that my stalker was carrying around a present for me in his backpack. I thanked him for the heads up, and I told my best friend, the gay revolution lesbian. She and I were sitting together on the inside of a row when the bell rang. We stood up to leave, but the girl on the other side of me turned to face us, blocking us from the exit. She was a close friend of the junior cheer captain's. She asked me what I was doing after school, and I knew that she must be trying to herd me towards my stalker so I could collect my presents. I leveled with her and said that I knew that my stalker was waiting for me somewhere, and I told her straight up that I wasn't going to play nice with him anymore. She turned on the same old guilt trip as everyone else, telling me how much he cared about me and how hard he had worked on those presents, but I refused to go. I knew that I needed to get out of the school as soon as possible, before she just told my stalker to come meet me at the library instead of the theater hall. To get her out of my way, I said I'd go meet him after I went to the bathroom, and she moved out of the walkway. My best friend and I hid out in the bathroom farthest from the theater hall. I knew that he wouldn't leave until he delivered his gifts, and we had rehearsal that day, so I knew I'd have to go down there sooner or later. My best friend suggested that she go down and retrieve the presents for me, so that he'd leave before I had to go to rehearsal. 2 more of my friends happened upon our bathroom crisis, and they decided to link up with my best friend on our mission. I waited in the bathroom while they went to intercept the gifts. 20 minutes later, they returned. Among the gifts were 3 boxes of my favorite candy, an expensive Doctor Who jewelry box, and a full bouquet of roses again. They told me, laughing uncomfortably, that there had been a whole group of people waiting for me to walk into the theater hall. My stalker wasn't too happy to hand over the presents, but my best friend made it clear that I wouldn't be coming to get them, so he could hand them over to my friends or never deliver them at all. After about 10 minutes, the group waiting for me dissipated, and my stalker gave away the gifts. I was so creeped out that I didn't keep any of them, not even the jewelry box, which was TARDIS-shaped and actually kind of cool. For my birthday a few weeks later, I got out of school after 4th period and went to a theme park with my cousin. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving or where I was going. My best friend told me that my stalker had waited outside the theater hall for me with a letter, and he had a rose in hand, until the school kicked everyone out who wasn't in theater. I was assistant director and light crew for one act play during that spring. An acquaintance of mine who didn't keep up with the gossip was in charge of making the program, and she mentioned how cute my boyfriend was for taking out an ad in the program for me. I was sufficiently freaked out. I told her that I didn't have a boyfriend, and I asked to see the ad that he'd paid for. It was a picture of my stalker and I from junior homecoming, along with a note that said something like, "Good luck, Nancy. I love you." I begged my friend to not put it in the program, and she didn't, seeing my obvious discomfort. She refunded him his money and made some excuse about a local business buying more ad space. He tried the same trick for the last show of the year, which I was actually in. He showed up to opening night and got kicked out for filming. The theater department has now instituted a widespread rule of checking what the person an ad is targeted at before printing it, which is more than school administration ever cared to do. During a cleanup day for theater the summer before senior year, a guy from a different school showed up to help. Help in quotations. He had been talking to me over social media for a few weeks, and I knew I was his next target. He'd made a game out of going on a date with every girl in our department. Sure enough, he asked me out while I cleaned up the prop closet, and I agreed. He was decent looking and he wasn't mentally unstable, even if he was a player. I also knew that if I played my cards right, I could turn this to my advantage. He was using me, so I just made sure I got something out of it too. We went on our date. It was okay, no weird advances or anything, and he bought me dinner. On the way home, I directed the conversation towards homecoming. He caught my drift and he asked me right there, no muss, no fuss. I said yes. Senior year had started. My new date was all the way over at his school on the other side of town. My stalker was in 2 of my classes and had the same lunch as me. I was hyper aware of him staring at me every day, but didn't want to make a big deal about it. I knew he wanted my attention, and I refused to give it to him. Instead, I went about my life as usual. I made friends with the teachers who were lunch hall monitors so I could leave the cafeteria, effectively avoiding my stalker. I ate lunch in the theater hall with my best friend every day. I asked my biology and English teachers to not make me sit by them or work in groups with them, and they agreed, if somewhat reluctantly. They, like pretty much everyone else, thought I was a dramatic cheerleader making up stories. I was a senior, and I really didn't want to deal with the bullcrap of a crazy stalker anymore. Not that I ever wanted to in the first place. Homecoming was even earlier this year than last year. In my English class, my stalker sat near two theater girls who usually walked to 7th period theater with me, and he turned around to ask them for ideas on how to ask me to homecoming. They were in the camp of classmates who were amused by my stalker's antics, so they wanted to rile him up and watch the fireworks. They also knew about the player who I was talking to, because theater kids are the worst gossips ever, and they gleefully told my stalker that I already had a date. He proceeded to attempt to bite his own finger off in class, which went about as well as you might think. Obviously, he didn't succeed, but he did draw blood, and he absolutely terrified my two theater friends who had incited his instability. He stared at me the whole time, and I sat on the other side of the room and ignored him. I didn't care what he did. I refused to give him my attention, and I wouldn't be intimidated by him anymore. After class, my two friends came up to me and told me the details of what had just happened. Together, the three of us approached the English teacher. She believed me fully this time. He was moved into a different English class by the next week. Side note, bless this teacher. She was the first adult I encountered who actually took action to protect me, and she continued to check in with me about the situation throughout the rest of the senior year. 6th period became nothing less than a sanctuary for me, because for once somebody believed me, and they were listening. I didn't have to worry about him after 4th period because I skipped lunch every day. I was getting confident about my escape maneuvers. I forgot to mention the third and weirdest self-harm incident. After getting kicked out of English class, he had desperately wanted my attention, so he got a pass out of his class one day and found mine. He walked to the trash can outside the door to my class, and I watched in horror and disgust as he pulled out a tooth and held his face over the trash can, spitting out blood. I know that I said I wasn't giving him any more attention, but the kid just ripped out a body part. I feel like I'm allowed to be terrified. Then my usual hall monitor was gone, and I got stuck in the cafeteria. I had been out of lunch for so long that I had forgotten my stalker was in the same one, until I accidentally made eye contact with them, staring at me from across the room like some kind of grudge ghost. The second I saw him, he started speed walking across the room to my table. I ignored him, hoping he was just trying to psych me out, but it didn't work. He sat down in the seat next to mine. I was freaking out. I looked at the girl on the other side of me, and I begged her to get him out of here. She simply laughed at me. A year before, I would have kept quiet and dealt with my discomfort for a fear of people hating me, but I was a year older and I was already contracting senioritis. So I stood up, grabbed my backpack, and stomped out of the lunchroom. The hall monitor stopped me, asking where I was going and if I had a pass. I said that I was going to talk to the crisis counselor, and he let me go, probably because he didn't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. I walked directly to the counselor's office, signed in, and found myself sitting in her office a few minutes later. I told her the whole story from the beginning. I had been to her office once before, and she shooed me away after saying I was being too dramatic. This time she didn't. Instead, she spent the greater half of the hour I was there asking why I hadn't come to her when this all started. When I finally got her to address the actual problem, her first question reaffirmed my fears. She went on to ask me after I told her about the self-harm and threats and general creepiness, what about him made me so opposed to dating him. I thought I was going to scream. I had a gut feeling that the truth wouldn't get me anywhere, and I needed action. I didn't care how I got it done, but I needed him out of my life and definitely out of my classes. So, knowing full well her attachment to Jesus, I pulled the Saving Myself for Jesus card. I put all of those Sundays being forced to go to church to good use, and it worked. She finally stopped asking me why I waited, why not just date him, and asked what would make me feel safer. I told her to get him out of my schedule, and she said she'd look into my options. Within a day, I was called back into her office. She had gotten him placed in another lunch period, but biology was only offered 4th period, and both of us needed it to graduate. I still considered this a victory, though. I only had to see him for 50 minutes every day. She told me to come talk to her whenever I needed someone to lean on, and she would make sure that my teachers understood. Well, my stalker found new methods of seeing me. My best friends didn't make the cast of the winter musical, but I did. I didn't realize that I had been isolated until my stalker joined the crew and regularly tried to intimidate me. He would drill holes in set pieces that didn't need work because I was sitting near them and he wanted to watch me flinch. He would steal the props I used and hide them in the shop, so I had to be near him to retrieve them. My new crush and I were co-dance captains, and she convinced her friend that the set had to keep my stalker off stage at all times. After the musical ended in spring, my new crush told me that she heard my stalker was getting angry about me playing hard to get. I was hanging out in the theater hall with a few crew kids, getting ready for a one-act play, when one of them pointed at me shocked and then went, "You're Nancy?" He told me that he had seen pictures of my backyard. I was confused and weirded out. So he explained that my stalker had shown him pictures of my backyard and porch. I asked to see them, and he said he didn't have the pictures. He'd just been shown them by my stalker. I didn't really believe him, and he could tell. So he said, "You have a big bay window in your living room, a bunch of bikes on your back porch, and a big rose bush." It was an accurate description. I don't know for sure how to explain that, but I've theorized that my stalker had at some point been in my backyard before we adopted our purebred Doberman. The dog had freaked out in the middle of the night a few times, but we always brushed it off. Now I wasn't so sure. My bedroom was in the front of the house, so I tried to reassure myself by thinking that he hadn't seen me changing or anything super scary, but it didn't really help. My best friend was disowned by her mother and stepdad, and within a weekend she was shipped off to go live with her biological father. I told myself I could survive the next 4 months and graduate, and that I'd never see my stalker again. I persuaded my parents as prom and graduation had approached that I only wanted one present, my best friend. They paid for her plane ticket both ways and flew her home to be my date to prom. I kept her a secret so I could surprise our other friends when she showed up at prom to dance with us. My stalker only briefly entertained the thought of asking me to prom, which I later discovered was the cheer captain's doing. I guess she had finally started to realize the full effect of her actions because she told him he needed to leave me alone. I don't know what else she said, but he went eerily silent in the weeks leading up to prom. He still came to the last play of the year, but he didn't film me this time. He waited for me outside the auditorium afterwards, but I was with other people on our way to the cast dinner, and he didn't try anything. At prom, my best friends were elated when they saw that my best friend had returned. We danced and talked crap and had a great time together. It was honestly one of the best moments of my life when they walked in and saw her. Of course, my stalker tried one last time to change my mind. My friends and I were sitting at one of the tables together, laughing and catching up, and I saw my best friend's expression turn into a glare when someone walked up behind me. I turned around to see my stalker waiting behind my chair. I stood up and said as calmly as possible that he wasn't welcome here. I was also 17 and pissed off and feeling unstoppable, so I tacked on, "If you ever speak to me again, I'll rip your balls off." It was the last thing that I ever said to him. My best friend flew back home, and we all graduated, and everyone went our separate ways for college. I saw my stalker again at the first homecoming after I graduated high school, but he didn't talk to me. He just stared at me the whole time. Later on, he showed up to my sister's fall play at her alma mater, and he asked a cast member where she was and if I was there. Lucky me, the cast member was one of my littles, and he told my stalker he needed to leave immediately. I guess this story has a happy ending. I got away in one piece, with no foreseeable appearance of my stalker in my future. I'm quite an awkward person, and I can struggle to make friends due to my shyness. So in late 2019 to early 2020, I decided to join my 6th form's D&D club. I was hooked, and the fact that I had met a very lovely girl there who I'll refer to as May, well, it made it all the more enjoyable. It was the new type of friendship where all you want to do is spend time with your new best friend. And so when May asked me to join their D&D party, I was overjoyed. I really did like her. She started off a little awkward, as was I, but she was really sweet and understanding, and we ended up having a lot of our more nerdy interests in common. The first time we hung out on our own was a lot more uncomfortable than I was expecting. Of course, as we had only been friends for a couple of weeks, so I knew it would be a little awkward, but I wasn't expecting how terribly unpleasant it turned out to be. We didn't seem to click for some reason. Everything was fine when we were in a group chat, but one-on-one, May was strange. She would completely ignore me for no reason all of a sudden, make very odd jokes but in a serious manner, leaving the pause a little too long, and would then laugh, as well as other strange mannerisms. That was just before I left 6th form early due to personal reasons. It wasn't super off-putting. I wanted to get closer to her, believing once she got used to me, maybe she'd mellow out a little. Boy, was I wrong. Once I did officially leave school, May became intense. It started out with her asking to meet up with me every other day. Keep in mind, I'd started working full-time by this point and had very little time to see people. Which was fine because she'd understand that I was busy, right? Wrong. She started getting annoyed and upset to an inappropriate level. For example, she would make me send a picture of my calendar to prove that I was too busy to see her. And even when she could see it was chock-a-block, she would start to try and manipulate me and make me feel bad for not being able to see her. Messaging me things like, "I love you, but you're so difficult to meet up with," calling me her best friend and telling me she was crying because she couldn't see me. These conversations would happen around 2 to 3 times a week, and honestly, I had started getting creeped out. By this point, we had only known each other for around 2 to 3 months. We had met up alone around 5 to 6 times, and had seen each other almost every day at school before my departure. My creepometer had really started to rise, but it wasn't at a point where I wanted to end the friendship yet. Sure, it was annoying how possessive she was, but it's not like she was stalking me. Yet. I distanced myself from her a little, just for my own sanity, as her neediness had progressively gotten more and more intense, and it became taxing on my mental health, but I still wanted to be friends with her. Underneath everything, May was really lovely, but that was until they came to my house for the very first time, back when I was living with my parents. May turned up a lot later than we agreed, which peeved me out a little as they knew I had to work the next day, but it wasn't a biggie. And that's when the really uncomfortable comments had started. Now, my parents' house is very nice. It's big. They have a gym and a hot tub, lovely garden, etc. By this point, I was used to my friends making a couple of comments like, "Wow, your house is so nice," or "Damn, I really love your house." My favorite was probably when my cousin compared the house's size to a horse ding-a-ling. Now that was funny, but May wouldn't stop. She would drop how large or nice she thought that my house was in every other sentence, which later developed to her slating the house and my parents' jobs constantly, telling me that I was shoving my parents' wealth in her face, or that my parents got their money because they take advantage of vulnerable children. Please keep in mind that I had not spoken about my parents' money or the family home once in this conversation, because talking about private things like that is just very uncomfortable to me. Then she started to get even stranger, asking me to cuddle and spoon and telling me that I couldn't escape, going on and asking if I was really happy with my boyfriend, then making jokes that didn't really feel like jokes at my expense. I was very uneasy, and my parents could see it too. So after that day, I told May that I was way too busy to meet up, so to please stop asking me. She didn't. She started making jokes that because I wouldn't see her, she would just show up on my house and catch me off guard. She even changed her jog route so she ran past my parents' house every day. And then she had started messaging my boyfriend. It was completely out of the blue, I hadn't even given her a social media or name. I hadn't even really discussed my relationship with her at all. It was very uncomfortable for everyone involved, and my boyfriend was obviously not interested in being her friend due to how uncomfortable she made me. She told him things like, "You need my permission to date because I'm her best friend, and you have to be friends with me and like me because I'm her best friend." We were not even close to being best friends. She would spam my phone with messages, and I would reply back around twice a month. I was completely smothered by her. It was so strange. But when I received a screenshot of their conversation from my boyfriend because he was so creeped out, I was livid. The screenshot showed them having a very one-sided conversation on her behalf, where all of a sudden she told him she loved him. I didn't know what to say, and neither did he, so I confronted her. May tried to turn it around on me and said, and I quote, "I was talking to your boyfriend, and he knew about me. Impossible. I figured out you talked about me without my consent. Heartbroken." She really said it just like that. It was surreal. I told her that I had mentioned that we met up and that she was a friend from school, which was true. Of course, I told him that she made me uncomfortable, but she didn't know that, and the conversation ended there. Then she went to uni and we didn't really speak for a while. It was relaxing. All of the anxiety around the situation faded. May had made new friends and I was free. But when she came home for Christmas, everything started up again, and all the anxiety came back. I was going through a really tough time, so me and my mom went away for a few days. But when I didn't respond to May for 3 days because I was busy, she went crazy. She spammed me on every social media I have daily. Instagram, Snapchat, Discord, text messages, and more. The messages started off normally with her asking if we could meet up and that she was home from university. But they gradually became angry. And I won't lie, it was scary. I believed her when she said she would just show up at my house, and I was terrified that she'd ask my friends for my new address under the pretense that I had forgotten to give it to her, as they threatened to do this in joking form before. It felt obsessive, and I didn't know what to do. She wouldn't stop messaging me, and it became a constant stream of creepy messages, so I exploded at her. I told her that this behavior was really creepy, that I've never been made to feel this uncomfortable by someone before, that she didn't have boundaries, and I was scared about the joke-disguised threat she made. I ended it off with the fact that I didn't want to see her again, and could she please stop messaging me. I could have definitely been nicer about it, but that never seemed to work in our prior conversations when I tried to defend why I was busy and couldn't see her. She became incredibly apologetic, then got angry, then started to try and manipulate me into meeting up, apologizing and putting herself down, and then telling me that she loved me. I was just so over all of her nonsense and weird behaviors. I felt bad for her. I had wanted to be her friend so much, but she was so obsessive and overbearing, and even though I tried for so long to make it work, she had ended up pushing me away because of her behavior. I do wish her well, and I hope she gets help for whatever's going on with her. But creepy stalker friend, you're definitely not my cup of tea. Please stay the hell away from me. My encounters with this individual who I'll call Ben began in November 2024 at school. He was a friend of one of my friends named Tom, and eventually we became part of the same friend group. I have always found Ben to be a bit creepy, which seemed to be the school population's general view toward him. However, once we began regularly socializing, I had started to feel bad for my presumptions. That was until we were added to a WhatsApp group chat, and that's when things started to take a turn. First, it was the mindless constant images of gore that he would send, involving very graphic details of horrible things. I don't know if these images were even real or not, but they made me very uncomfortable, to the point that I had to ask him to stop, to which I was then told to just take a joke and stop being a puss. This was followed by messages where he stated that he had harmed animals, along with other sick fantasies involving people I knew. I wasn't sure if Ben was just your average edgelord or what, but something just didn't seem right. Then one Saturday, I was alone Christmas shopping in my town when I had noticed Ben standing down the road from me, just staring directly at me. I waved at him awkwardly, to which he just stared before walking casually down a side street. For the rest of the trip, every time I turned, Ben was just standing, just staring at me from a distance. I eventually gave up shopping and went home, pissed off. I texted him about it, to which he just stated that he didn't know what I was talking about. Then in school and lunch, Ben and another friend Jack convinced me to come with them to the forest behind our school with another friend named Zach. It was stupid, I know, but I was bored and I went along anyway. We had started getting deeper into the forest, and Ben was becoming weird. He was laughing, and he just kept repeating, "Closer, let's get closer." Eventually, both Zach and I agreed that it was creepy and off-putting, so we turned back. Ben seemed pissed when he and Jack returned. However, when we asked why they wanted us to go further, he responded that he had wanted to set a fire and show us. After this, I really distanced myself and I left the group chat, though I was eventually re-added. While on my hiatus from that group, Ben had actually attacked Tom with a homemade blade. He did this in school, and it resulted in a wound near his wrist. This resulted in Ben being expelled from school, though no legal action was taken. It's now been a month and I was re-added to the group chat, only to find that Ben has been sending graphic self-harm photos and talking about his hatred for his own family, blaming them for his misfortune. I'm worried that he genuinely gives off serial killer vibes, but perhaps I'm just being paranoid. I often wonder about that time in the forest and in the town plaza. Anyways, thanks for listening, everyone. I guess I'm just wondering if I should really be concerned, or maybe I'm just overreacting. I sometimes worry that Ben knows where I live and isn't far away. I'm a 23-year-old female and from the UK. From the ages of 9 to 11, I was best friends with this girl who we'll call Sarah. She and I formed a little group at primary school with 2 other girls who we'll call Lauren and Ellen, but we were each other's best friend first as we lived so close. Sarah lived 1 street over from me, so I would always sleep over at her house, but she never came over to my house as we were very, very poor, and I was really embarrassed about the state of my house. The sleepovers became a weekly thing, and it was just her and her mom who worked every weekend, so we spent a lot of time in the house alone. It started off odd. She would show me her mom's pornos from like the 80s that all included vampires. And as a 9-year-old kid, I had no idea what was going on, and I'd just sit there blankly. She'd always say, "Doesn't it just make you want to do it?" and things like that. She would also get out her mom's sex toys and show them to me, and then make me hold them, which never really seemed odd to me until I was older, but even at the time I felt uncomfortable. I was a pretty nervous child, and I had really struggled to make friends. So I'd often go along with whatever she said just because I felt lucky to have a friend outside of school. She would often make up scary stories or do mildly creepy things at night, like sing patty cake in a babyish voice close to my ear while I was sleeping, or pretend her dolls were alive and wanted to punish me for taking her attention away from them, which creeped me out but never outright concerned me. Though my mom was worried that I was having constant nightmares, none of this affected me too much, and so I stayed friends with her. Later that year, I got mauled by a dog, a Japanese Akita, and had reconstructive surgery on my face. Due to this, I had to take medication at certain times, and would be escorted to and from the school office every day by my other friend Lauren. Because of this, we became best friends, and I had started sleeping over at hers instead of Sarah's. Sarah didn't like that I was getting a lot of attention due to my fresh scar, or that I had replaced her with another friend, so she said that she was pregnant at 10, complete with tears and plans and everything, including Ellen telling her mom at the end. This went on for months, and as kids we didn't even question the validity of her claim. At some point she had dropped this, and next she pretended she had cancer. I called her out on that one, as I knew a lot about cancer because my auntie had it at the time, which she really didn't like. After that, she had started calling me names, stealing my school stuff, made up lies about me, and more. making our other two friends pick between me or her. It really fluctuated a lot, so sometimes they'd be my friends, and other times they'd be hers. During this time, I had slept over at Lauren's house a lot, and a lot of my stuff went missing. A pink flip phone that I had just got as my first phone ever, and my DS Lite, which was my prized possession. This was like 2010, by the way. My mom had gotten involved at this point and demanded that they find it, as she knew I'd taken it to the sleepover. In the end, Lauren supposedly found them both smashed up on a road far from where either of us lived, and then returned them to me completely broken weeks later. Later on, both Sarah and I got invited to the swimming baths for Lauren's birthday, and for once we got along. It was like really having my best friend back. Us kids were basically left alone in the pool to just mess around for a few hours. An important note here is that I couldn't swim. I still can't to this day. I had chickenpox during school swimming lessons, and I'm really terrified of water now, so I haven't learned since. Anyway, at one point I was so sick of being stuck in the shallow end like a baby at the age of 11 when all of my friends were swimming at the deep end. Sarah had noticed this and came over to me. She offered to piggyback me and swim to the deep end so I could play with everyone else. I was so happy to be included. I didn't even think about the fact that she didn't regularly like me, or that if she left me I couldn't swim back. I just hopped right on and she swam us out. She started mock tipping sideways like she was going to drop me, and I cried and begged her to take me back. I was terrified of getting water in my face or going underwater. I still can't go underwater to this day. She just laughed at me and dropped me, dunking me under the water and holding my head there where I struggled and couldn't breathe. I remember struggling and being unable to breathe, but the next thing I knew was a lifeguard had pulled me to the side of the pool and I was choking on air and shaking. I also have horrible reactions to the smell of chlorine, and it makes me sneeze and my eyes swell. So I had to be picked up, but everyone told me it was an accident and just kids messing around. She later told me that it was a joke. I should learn to swim and stop being a baby, which I guess is true, but still, after that day I didn't want to be around her anymore. Our friends still flip-flopped between us, some days being her friend and others being mine. But that was fine. I didn't care anymore. I was sick of her. I avoided her like the plague. Primary school was almost over, and I never had to see her again. Eventually, we all went to secondary school. This was between the ages of 11 to 16, and we all went to the same one. But my school was categorized into classes, the top being the smartest, and I, Lauren, and Ellen were all in the top class, and Sarah wasn't. It was a nice little buffer, and I got my best friends back, as well as making even more friends for the first time ever. I really completely forgot all about her in all honesty. Then one day as I walked home from school, I passed the corner shop on my way home, and she was there, blocking the path, waiting for me. Her school tie was tied around her head like a headband, and she was crying. I had to go around her, and she literally growled at me and launched herself at me. I was like 4'7", 80 pounds if that, and she was much larger than me, and I'd never been in a fight ever. I had no idea what to do to get her off me while she clawed on my neck and alternated kneeing me and elbowing me. I just wanted her off me. I grabbed the tie wrapped around her head and pulled as hard as I could until she fell to the ground, and with that, she just ran away crying. I remember walking the rest of the way home just so confused. What had I even done to her to deserve that? I hadn't even spoken to her in like 8 months at that point, and she and our other friends were in the same tutor group, and they hadn't mentioned anything to me. Eventually, I forgot about that. I turned 12 a couple of months later, and the day after my birthday, I walked into school having spent all my birthday money on new pens, and I was so excited to show them off. I was a weird kid, I know. First lesson of the day begins, and Ellen runs up to me and says, "Sarah's brought a knife to school. She showed me in tutoring. She said that she brought it for you." I kind of just laughed out loud at that, assuming it was a joke of some kind since any sort of weapon brought to our school was grounds for immediate expulsion, and nobody was stupid enough to try that, especially at 12 years old. I think I even made a joke about it probably being a butter knife. She repeated that she was serious, that she told the teachers about it, and that they called the police. Again, I didn't believe her. To me, it just seemed crazy that they would call the police over a 12-year-old bringing a knife to school, but they did. The police arrived minutes later, and that was that. I never saw the knife, but she was immediately expelled. I don't know for sure why me or what she had planned to do, but she must have told multiple people that she was going to do something to me, because it was an ongoing joke for the rest of the time that I was at school. She ended up going to the school that my little sister had just started at, and she had apparently also told my sister it had been for me, but it was just a joke. Side note, my little sister is a year younger and she's a fighter. Even at this age now, I've still never been in a real fight, and my sister's always fought anyone who badmouthed me. She's a real one. My sister punched her for that, and that was the last I heard from her until I was 18 years old. I turned 18 and was at university, and then out of the blue, I was tagged in an old primary school photo by Sarah. It had the whole class in it, but for some reason, she had only tagged me. I found this odd, but didn't do anything about it, and it was my old Facebook account anyways, so I ignored it. A couple of months later, it was Sarah's birthday, and she had sent me a message asking if I would come to her birthday party. Mind you, I hadn't spoken to her in like 6 years, and the last time I had, she fought me and then brought in a knife. I simply just ignored the message and moved on with my life. Later on, I saw that she and Lauren had reconnected and were best friends again. Which always concerned me as Lauren and I stayed friends for years, and she knew everything about how Sarah treated me. But I've never really put much thought into it other than it's highly likely that they were still friends the whole time, and that Lauren had stolen my DS and phone because of Sarah and they broke them together. The last time I saw her, I was 19. I was on a date with my boyfriend walking down the street, and I saw her standing at the bus stop. I wasn't really bothered since I'd neither seen or heard anything from her for years, until our eyes met and she grinned and pulled out her phone and it started filming me until I was out of sight. I have no idea why she did any of the things she did, and I mostly just feel sorry for her based on the way her life has turned out so far, but I still hope that I never have to see her again. When I was 7 years old, my mom and father got a divorce. This event prompted her to move and follow her career in a different small town, which would pay much better as she was a single parent now. On our long 12-hour drive to the new location, we stopped on the way in this little town which was very hippie. Sort of had lots of art, little shops, etc. My mom said we were here to meet up with a friend, Paulette. I guess they went way back in her college days and just recently got in touch after a decade. We ended up going to this East Indian restaurant where we would meet for dinner. This slender, somewhat fragile woman walks in, and she was very tall, well over 6 feet. She had big, frizzy, curly brown hair with blonde streaks in it. She was Caucasian, wearing a colorful shawl with feather earrings with very pale blue eyes. She looked like a mosaic tapestry or something. She walks over to the table and gives my mom a greeting and a big hug. Then she makes her way to my older brother and shakes his hand, after coming around to my side of the table. I lent my hand out to her, and she just stood there expressionless, with her mouth partly open with a blank gaze, just staring at me. It briefly made me uncomfortable, and then a flick of a switch, this spark ignited in her face. She made this huge Cheshire Cat smile, kneels over, and then hugs me tightly. She goes back to sit with my mom and they catch up over the years while we eat dinner. My mom gets the bill and says to her in the parking lot, "You can just follow us," to Paulette. We get in her car and my mom explains to us that Paulette is actually coming over to live with us for a while. She followed us for the next several hours. We got to the new place and unpack our necessities, as we had a moving truck hired with the rest of our stuff arriving in the morning. There was a bunk bed already set up at this place for me and my brother. It was fairly late into the night, roughly 11 p.m. when we arrived. My brother and I set up our sleeping bags, and I took the top bunk. My mom says goodnight, and I fell asleep pretty quickly. I woke up around 1:30 a.m. I guess the patio deck light got turned on somehow, which was right beside our room. I gazed out through the blinders, and I saw the back of Paulette's curly hair. She was sitting on the deck cross-legged smoking a cigarette. I didn't think much of it and just laid back down until I noticed the light from the window gets partly blocked out. I looked behind me with my head still on the pillow, and I see the unmistakable outline of Paulette's shadow facing my window. She was there for a few minutes, but I didn't want to lean up, so I just pretended to sleep. Her shadow moves and I hear the front door close. The patio light turns off after a few minutes. I reposition myself facing the wall to go back to sleep. As I begin to drift off, the door to our room opens slowly, and I quickly turned my head around, and it wasn't my mom. It was Paulette wearing a nightgown. I turned back facing the wall and closed my eyes. She quietly makes her way to my bunk. I feel her fingers in a claw formation start to comb the back of my hair, running her nails on the back of my scalp. I kept my eyes closed tightly, nearly holding my breath, trying to give no signs that I'm awake. I smell some essential oils like lavender, and she starts rubbing oil into the back of my neck and also pinching the back of my neck muscle, sometimes holding it and releasing. I began to kind of accept whatever's happening because it didn't feel all that bad after a while. I actually ended up falling asleep to it after my initial confusion. I wake up in the morning and my mom's off at work, and Paulette is waiting at the table with cereal for me and my brother. She had put chocolate chips in my bowl, but not my brother's. My brother and I made small talk with her. She was very giggly and seemed to be trying to make us comfortable with the new situation. My brother heads back to his room to set up his GameCube after he had his cereal. I was a much slower eater than my older brother, so I was always the last at the table. As I slowly ate, she was just sitting there watching my every move. Once I finished, I told her thank you, and then grabbed my bowl to bring it to the sink. She places her hand on mine and then says, "I gave you a neck massage so that you wouldn't pee in your bed. I know that lots of young ones pee beds when they sleep in unfamiliar surroundings." I just looked up at her and said, I've never peed my bed before, but thank you." She continued to massage the back of my neck for the next few nights. I ended up telling her that I'm comfortable here now, that she didn't need to do this anymore. She reacted to that with a sigh, but acknowledged it. I had started elementary school the following week, which meant getting earlier night sleeps around 8 p.m. Her and my mom would stay up much later than me and my brother, and they would drink wine together. I always waited for them to go to bed before I used the washroom at night to go pee, because my mom would kind of scold me for being up late on weeknights. Once things got quiet at around 11 in the house, I would sneak out and tippy-toe to go use the washroom. This was my ritual for the next few weeks. That is, until Paulette started doing the exact same thing at the same time every time. Every night when I needed to use the washroom, it just so happened Paulette needed it too, and she would blaze down the hallway across from my room when I opened the door. I'd just go back to my room and wait for her. It started happening so frequently that I would just go outside to pee from the back mudroom door. This had started to piss me off. I'd open my door as quietly as I could and then sprint to the washroom. This seemed effective for a while. One night I got up slightly later than usual, around 12. I was a little more careless with noise because I was half asleep and groggy. I opened the door, and Paulette's door just slammed open instantly. She barges out in the dimly moonlit hallway completely naked and just starts quickly walking down the hallway. I was already so down the hallway, I couldn't turn my back to my room. I jumped behind my mom's jade plant and squished my knees to my chest and tugged my head down. She whizzed straight by me so fast that I felt wind push my hair. She stays in the washroom for almost an hour with the door open to crack, the lights off, and in silence. I stayed there beside the washroom, tucked in the corner behind the plant pot, not making a single sound. I hear the washroom door open completely, and she starts pacing up and down the hallway. I kept it small and insignificant behind the plant until she went back to her room. I brushed this off as just a complete accident, that it was just unfortunate timing. But now every night going forward, she would literally sprint down the hallway naked if I'd ever made a single noise, creak the floorboard, open my door, etc. About 2 months into this, my brother and I were sword fighting with tree branches outside. He ends up clipping my forehead, causing it to bleed pretty badly. Paulette sees this happen and she walks up to my brother. I thought she was going to scold him, but no. She stomp kicks him in the head with her boot, causing him to fall on his back. He gets up off the ground crying and runs into the house. She grabs me and starts cradling me, rocking me back and forward. She's shaking so much that she was actually vibrating, repeatedly asking, "Are you hurt?" in a shaky voice. Anyway, my mom finds out through my brother what had happened and decides that she had to leave. On her final day, she had made a point to see me one-on-one in the driveway before entering her car. She then knelt down and said to me, "I hope I can see you in a different life. You remind me so much of my husband. Goodbye." And she actually starts bawling her eyes out, hugging me. I asked my mom who her husband was. I guess he was a Marine that died in Afghanistan a few months prior to her moving in with us. My mom said that she would frequently say how much I reminded her of him on a daily basis. My mom hasn't spoken to her since. I've never told my mom about the massages or anything to this day, as she was already exiled and I felt it would just cause even more drama. Out of respect for everyone's privacy, names in this story will be changed. The important people to know are my cousin and I, who we'll call Drew. Some of the prominent neighborhood kids we'll call Josh, Kylie, and Devin, and of course, Gabe. To set the story, this was around the time that my mom and dad divorced. It wasn't a clean divorce either, and there was a lot going on around this time. My mom had to move out of the school district and into a small home quickly, and my dad kept the house in our neighborhood. I bring this up to explain that although my two brothers decided to stay with my dad, me and my cousin, who lived with us most of his life, decided to move in with my mom. The issue was that my mom's new place wasn't within the school district, which meant no buses. So the setup was that she'd bring us to school before work, and then after school we would catch the bus to my dad's house and stay there for a couple of hours until she got off work. Now that everything's explained, let's get into what you're really here for. There were quite a few kids in our neighborhood, and I guess you could say we all got along and hung out quite a bit. We would all ride the bus together, hang out after school, and hell, even try to build forts in the Vine. The Vine was a spot in the woods you could access through a small opening at the end of a cul-de-sac. This is important later. It was an everyday thing for us, really, until one day a new family had moved into the neighborhood, and with them their son, Gabe. He had semi-long brown hair and he was skinny. We first met Gabe on the school bus, and us being curious about a new kid in our neighborhood, we were all eager to talk to him. You probably think we got some off vibe from him, or maybe something about him was creepy, but honestly, he just seemed like a regular kid. He seemed to fit in with the other kids in the neighborhood. It became normal to see me, Josh, Kylie, Drew, and Evan and Gabe all hanging out, rather all of us or a combination of the few. After getting to know him, we learned that Gabe actually used to go to our school, but that he got expelled after he threw a desk at a teacher, and only just that school year let him back into our school. Back then, we had brushed it off as just something edgy that he did, but knowing the events now, it should have been the first red flag. You see, Gabe, Drew, and I really became close. I'd argue closer than the other kids. I would have considered him a friend instead of just another neighborhood kid to hang out with, which is why we didn't immediately drop him after the following events. I wasn't there for this, but heard about it after the fact. Drew and I got on the bus one day, and immediately I noticed that Gabe wasn't there. We sat next to each other every day on the bus. I just assumed he was absent, and Drew decided to sit by me. Kylie and Evan, who sat near us, had started talking about something that happened, and we joined into their conversation. Apparently, not long after Drew and I left to go to my mom's, Gabe had invited Kylie, Evan, and Josh to his house. Now, I don't remember what set this in motion or what really happened, but the hangout ended with Gabe chasing Josh home, with a machete in his hands. Josh lived on the other side of the neighborhood, and once he got home, his mother came out to see what was going on as she had heard him yelling for her from the front yard. When she stepped out, Gabe had chased both of them inside. The scariest part? They heard from Josh that he was laughing, and he had a smile on his face as he did it, like he enjoyed terrorizing them. The cops were called, and honestly, I don't know what came out other than Gabe was gone from school for a few days after that. When he came back, he acted like it never even happened. The kids in our neighborhood had started growing apart from Gabe after that, especially Josh, who I actually never saw talk to him again. I mean, who would blame him? I guess I felt bad for Gabe a little bit. My stupid brain must have decided it was just a bad prank that went too far or something like that. Oh, how dumb was I? I truly believe Gabe had changed after that, like something had clicked in his brain. Not long after that, we were on the bus and I was talking to him as we had sat in the same seats. All of a sudden, he just pulled a pencil out and tried to stab me with it. Not only tried, but he actually did stab me, right in the neck. Luckily, it only broke the skin, but it shocked me. He laughed about it like he was joking, and I decided to move seats. When I got off, I had felt the need to explain what happened to the bus driver. I never should have done that. I believe to this day that one choice caused what happened next. He was kicked off the bus for a couple of days. When he returned, they made him sit at the front of the bus. He knew it was me who snitched on him. When I'd walk past him to get off the bus, he would glare at me, and it felt evil. He called me names and a snitch, and I was scared of him. Fast forward a week later, and all the kids in our neighborhood just decided that they wouldn't hang out with Gabe anymore at all. And I wish I could say the same. Even after everything I had just spilled to you all, I was naive and dumb. Eventually, he messaged me apologizing, and he messaged me to ask if Drew and I wanted to hang out. I don't know why, but we agreed. I think I remember him saying that he and some of the other kids were going to go hang out at the Vine and build some forts, and I think that's why we agreed. You know, because the other kids would be there too. So we set off to meet him at his house, which was just down the street from ours. We knocked on his door, and he answered it holding a knife. Screw the red flag. I was ignoring a whole red alarm at this point. It was a kitchen knife with some sort of orange handle. He had a smile on his face. He held his arm up and he had started cutting himself. We should have just left right there. Why didn't we just leave? After a couple of cuts, he laughed, all like it was some sort of joke. It wasn't until now that I realized that this kid was truly psychotic, like something was really wrong with him. He had a couple of tools with him, and he told us to follow him to the Vine, and for some dumb reason we did. I was really holding out hope that he would be normal when all the other kids would be there. We got to the small opening to the Vine and walked in. To get to the small pond in the Vine, you had to go down a slightly steep hill and through the brush, and you'd be there. I bet you could feel my surprise when I realized that nobody else was there. I looked at Gabe, who just chuckled. "They must be late. Let's just get started," he said to me. Both Drew and I were on edge, and I bet Gabe could feel it. "Hey, go find some sticks and logs to build the fort," he told me. He pointed over towards the pond. I obeyed and made my way over to the area. About 10 or 15 seconds after I'd started walking, I just got the feeling telling me to turn around, and I'll never ever stop thanking God for doing just that. Gabe was there creeping up to my cousin, who was picking up a large rock. Gabe had a hoe-looking tool in his hand, raising it slowly. I then shouted at him. My cousin jolted up, and Gabe quickly lowered the hoe and then looked at me in confusion. I ran up to them, telling them my mom messaged me and that it was time to go. That was a lie, of course. My phone only worked on Wi-Fi at the time. I felt that Gabe knew that I saw him, so I grabbed my cousin, who didn't for a second question me, and we quickly started leaving. And at that very moment, he chased us. We booked it through the woods for a solid half of a minute and got to the steep part, quickly climbing it. I looked back and saw Gabe, with the face that I could only describe as a psychopath, chasing us. I prayed that we wouldn't slip or fall, and thank God we didn't. Luckily, Gabe had struggled a bit, giving us time to bolt out of the entrance. We ran halfway up the street and turned around. Gabe wasn't there. In fact, we never even saw him leave. We went home, and the next day we told some of the other kids what had happened. The weirdest part is, though, we never saw Gabe again. Not on the bus or at school. Very shortly after, his parents moved from that house, and my dad moved out of that neighborhood a year later. My mom also found a newer house in our school district. This was years ago. I recently looked Gabe up to see whatever happened to him, but nothing came up. No Facebook page, no Instagram, nothing. It's like he just vanished, like he never even existed in the first place, but I know he did. I don't live anywhere near there anymore, and thank God for that. Gabe, I don't know where you are or what happened to you, but as long as I don't ever see you again, I'm fine.